Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to another weekly wrap-up, also the last day of VEDA. I'm tired, but I did read 3 books this past week. The first one was Martians Abroad by Carrie Vaughn. Almost everything I've read about this book, what people are saying about it, has to do with how it's kind of a riff on Heinlein's Juveniles, which were science fiction books with teenage or younger protagonists, written at a time that YA didn't exist. I'm not really paying attention to this so much because I've never read any of Heinlein's Juveniles and I don't really intend to, but in case you want to know, I'm pretty sure that Martians Abroad is inspired by Podcane of Mars. There's one review in particular which I'll try to dig up which explains the parallels, which I think this connection is interesting, but I went into this not knowing anything about what it might be inspired by and I still really enjoyed it just as. However, I do think that the publication of this book might be interesting because its DNA is very similar to a young adult novel, but it's actually published by Tor Books rather than a young adult or middle grade imprint, which probably tells you something about how the book was pitched. Maybe that it's of interest to people who have read Heinlein or Heinlein's Juveniles, which are, let's just say it, probably not going to be teenagers. Anyway, Martians Abroad is about Polly, a 17-year-old girl, and her twin brother Charles, who live on the Mars colony. Their mother is the administrator of the colony, and she decides to send her children to a prestigious academy on Earth. They don't really want to go, or rather, Polly doesn't want to go because she thinks this is just bupkis and she has her own internship and piloting training planned out and her mother's just ruined all of her plans. They end up going to the academy and Charles, he knows what's going on. He's kind of playing the political game. All the other teenagers there are the children of powerful, wealthy people on Earth or various and sundry places, and they're all more savvy than Polly is, basically. She wants to ignore the politics and everything going on. She just kind of wants to flunk out so she can go do her own thing. But then it turns out that they're somehow being targeted when they're going on school trips and then like field trips. Accidents are happening and they think that they are intentional. When I first started reading this, I was somewhat put off by Polly's character, her attitude. Just, she seems very contradictory and complaining about everything. And then as the book goes on, I really got into her character because, I'm not gonna lie, the way that she thinks and her attitude about some things really appeals to me because that's very much the way that I am. In particular, she has this thing where she does some pretty like heroic and dangerous things and everyone wants to like treat her as the hero and give her kudos. And she's like, why are you doing this? Anybody should have done this. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And it's almost in a way like shaming everybody else who's getting way too involved in the political games and, are we passing the test or not? And she's just like, whatever, do the right thing, save the person, etc. So I really liked that. The only iffy thing about this book, which makes me kind of reserve some judgment about it, is that the end is not so great. It's a little convenient or easy feeling. It feels like it is heavily implying a sequel that will pick up the story and segue into something else. So if there is a sequel, then I'm totally cool with the ending, but if there is no continuation, then the end was just kind of lame. The next thing I finished was The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi. This is his new book and the launch of a new series from him. It was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and I enjoyed reading it. It was a very fast read, it was very fun, and I want more. But at the end of the day, it was just okay. And maybe I should try to explain why I feel that way, despite enjoying many aspects of it, why it was just okay. I think after reading quite a few of Scalzi's books and noticing the vast similarities between all of them, which are all enjoyable things but are kind of getting samey, I'm ready for Scalzi to do something very different for him, to do a complete 180 and give his audience something unexpected. Because everything that I enjoyed about the collapsing empire are things that I have experienced in his other books, particularly the humor, which I very much appreciate because sometimes there isn't a lot of levity in science fiction. Science fiction can be a big depressing downer sometimes, and while some pretty horrible, traumatic, and catastrophic things happen in Scalzi's books, there's still humor and like really badass characters just saying the way that they feel and really funny, profanity-laden rants. If you want to read a good rant, read The Collapsing Empire, because there are some doozies in there. But at the end of the day, the whole thing felt in its entirety like I'd read this somewhere before, because the humor is the same, the character types are the same, even though I think more of the characters felt distinct from each other, like the two female characters are distinct, the two male characters are distinct. I recognized their basic types from everything else I've read by Scalzi, and then the style is very similar too. Though the things that I enjoyed about it were the plot and the characters and the humor and the world building. I'm not going to recap everything that the book is about because it's actually been talked about quite a bit, and I think a lot of people here know what the book is about. But I liked the plot. I liked this idea of a kind of a natural interdimensional highway thing, the flow, which allows people to go faster than light without actually going faster than light, connecting all the planets of the interdependency, this empire. That was a really cool idea, and that the plot, the big issue here, everything's at stake because the flow is changing course and disappearing, and humans have rather foolishly built an empire on something that they don't control. And there are similarities between this and climate change, which I think Thomas's review of this book explains the parallels there, which I found very interesting. So I liked that plot, and I really enjoyed how we had like two sides to the story. We have the people at the hub, the capital, where everything comes together in the flow and with the empire. You have people there working on the issue, and then you have the people at the very, very far end at a planet called End, which is the farthest away you can possibly get from Hub, are also working on the problem and trying to take advantage of or trying to warn people, and that they're eventually going to meet and work on it together. So a lot of this book felt like a setup in that regard, because it's just people finally meeting. But I still enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the basis and the world building and everything. But I find it weird that I got to the end of the book and just thought, that's it. This felt way too familiar. All of this will in no way deter me from picking up the next book, however, because I enjoy Scalzi. And the last book that I finished this week is a nonfiction book called Exoplanets. The subtitle is Diamond Worlds, Super Earths, Pulsar Planets, and the New Search for Life Beyond Our Solar System by Michael Summers and James Trefil. So obviously it's a book about how we find exoplanets and what we think we can interpret about what those planets are made of and what it would be like to be on their surface based on what little data we can get from them. It's also about kind of busting the paradigms that we have been working under while searching for life, and that we've been so focused on a very narrow range of possibilities for life that we have perhaps missed some of the other possibilities. That section actually was the most interesting to me because I never really read something like that, about talking about all those things that we have assumed about finding life, that has to be like carbon based, or there has to be water on the planet, that it has to be within the Goldilocks zone or whatever in the solar system, that all of those things may be wrong, and we've only recently realized that, mostly because of discovering exoplanets and also things on our own planet like life in the deep ocean by ocean vents and things like that. That was actually the most interesting part of the book for me, because I had never really thought about that as much, though I was familiar with some of it. But the bit about finding exoplanets and investigating them was surprisingly not new to me. I guess that I was familiar with a lot of these concepts and investigative methods from reading other popular science and astrophysics books, and almost all of the exoplanets that they talk about in depth, like the one that they think is very similar to Earth that made the news recently, I've already read about a lot of those exoplanets because they have made the news, and I will immediately go read articles like that. Nevertheless, I think this is a great introduction to exoplanets and an overview of the current status of that research field, so it would be perfect for somebody to pick up who hasn't read a lot of popular science or is just interested in this particular area. The only thing that I think was kind of a letdown for this book, and might be for anybody, is that the writing style and tone is a little bit off, and I'm not really sure why, but it rubbed me the wrong way sometimes, almost like it was trying to be very academic at times and then very speaking to beginners and young people. When I first started reading it, I wondered if it was like a young adult nonfiction work, because my library actually has those, but it was classified under the adult nonfiction, and I was just confused at who the audience was supposed to be, and I was expecting something more technical that assumes more knowledge on the reader's side, but it doesn't really. And that is everything that I read this past week. I'm gonna go away for a little while. After 30 videos in 30 days, I am so sick of myself. I am sick of looking at myself. I'm sick of hearing myself, and I'm sick of sitting here talking. I feel like I've just been talking endlessly this month. So I'm gonna go away, probably for a week or two. I will be back briefly to do the short fiction live show with Joe on Saturday next week. It's gonna be May 6th on his channel, 1 p.m. Central Time, and that means it's gonna be at 7 p.m. in the UK. We will be discussing the latest issues of Clarkesworld and Uncanny Magazine, which are 127 and 15 respectively, I believe, as well as any other short fiction we read in April that we want to discuss. So come by and talk to us there. I'm not sure what other videos I might have out in the next week or so, but if you are looking for something to watch by me, well, I've recently made 30 videos just for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had a wonderful weekend, and I will be back eventually to talk to you again. And until then, bye.